Hello, everybody. It's me, Dominic Holland, doing my very first podcast. Welcome along. This is something which I have been meaning to do for a number of years now. Actually, it's not quite true. It's something that I have been told I should be doing for a number of years. But as with all things new, I am reluctant, old bloke, new tricks and stuff, especially technology. And you see, I have this blog which I write, and I really enjoy writing, and I like crafting words and crafting. I'm not sure if I craft anything with my words, but anyway, I enjoy it, and it gets a big readership. And but people tell me now that people don't want to read anything; they want to listen and preferably watch their content. So this is me, 2019, embracing technology for the very first time in a checkered career, and trying to make amends. And I do this. I do this because later on this year I have an important project I've been working on for many months and almost years, which is a new novel. And I've published novels myself before, but without the stratospheric success that we all dream of. And I don't think that's a reflection on the books. It could be, but I don't think it is, because the reviews have all been fantastic for my books. But what it is probably more a case of is that I have spent... I've never done it properly. I've never done it professionally. I've just written the book myself, had it edited, and then I have... Nikki and I have done the cover ourselves. We've gone through the software programs, put it through, and out comes a book that's published. And but you know, with the thousands of books that are published every day online, the chances of making a dent are remote. So, quick slurp of tea because I'm English. That cup was bought by Tom, by the way, so there's a little bit of Tom in this podcast. For Mum, it's Mum's cup. Tom bought it. My tea. I'm home alone actually this weekend, which is why I'm doing it, because Tess is gone, everyone's out of the house. So where was I? So I'm trying to get better, because I have what I tend to do as a creative. Oh gosh, I hate that word, creative. The use of the word advertising industry uses the word creative, which is the most, naff industry of all, isn't it? Surely, and like the way actors call themselves talent. Anyway, as a person who produces material, a book or a stand-up show, I spend all of my energies on the project, writing it, developing it, but I spend no energy on creating a platform in which it can thrive. So that's the mistake I've made, and I'm definitely not wanting to repeat that mistake. The definition of madness, they say, is do the same thing and expect different results. And I can't afford different results because I've spent too much time writing this book. Now, scroll back a little bit. I've just said earlier people aren't reading anything anymore, and I haven't published books successfully before, which begs the question, then why write another novel? Which is valid. I get that. I hear that, and it worries me a lot. The reason why I write books is because I feel compelled to, and I say that knowing how naff that sounds, okay? But I've only written 5 novels in 20 years since my first one was published properly in bookshops. That's not many, is it, really? It's only one every 4 years. And when I meet people who've read my books, they say, Dominic, why don't you write more books? I commonly ask that question. And the answer is that I have to have a very compelling story, that what I feel is a compelling story that's worth me writing it and worth someone spending the time to read it. Because it's not the price of a book, it's the time you need to spend reading it that I think is important. And that isn't the case with, I think, a lot of writing these days. You go into a bookshop at an airport, you've got 2 weeks ahead of you in the sun, you're going to need something to read, and you're overwhelmed. You're overwhelmed by the array of choice. And what you do with that much choice, you need to simplify things, you need to distill things down. And so you tend to, or what we tend to do, is to go for brand authors, because we feel safe with them. They must be good, they're a big author, I've heard of them, look at the jacket, look at the quotes. That's often a mistake, and the reason why that's a mistake is because we only have so many good stories in our imaginations. Neil Simon, very famous playwright, now passed, very celebrated, he was asked to write a play and was put under some pressure to write a play. And he forced himself to do that, and it was finally put on Broadway. And a reviewer came along, and her opinion was this, and I think it's a very pertinent piece of writing. Neil Simon didn't have a good idea for a play this year, but he wrote one anyway. And I think that's very commonly the case with literature. So you get brand authors, they'll be published whatever they write. The publishers will want a book a year if possible, or 18 months. And so often you might find yourselves on a beach lying there reading a book which you think this isn't very good. That's why. So I only write books when I have a story that I think is worthy. And my books are, they always start with a little tiny kernel of an idea that I hope is a good idea. And what tends to happen is it's in my head as I'm doing gigs and being a dad and doing all sorts of stuff. It wears away, and it sort of builds, and I embellish it and think of other ideas, and it gets to a point where I think, gosh, that's a really good story, I should write that down. And so I start writing a novel. And it's an incredibly involved process, writing a book. If ever you've done it, it's a very liberating thing, but it's an incredibly hard thing to do as well. So I've just written another book this year, and I'm publishing it later on, probably June, and I am determined to not make the same mistakes again, and I want to create a platform that gives it a chance. Okay, that's my plan. Now, podcasts, I've never done them. I've been on some of them. But I've normally been on them in a professional setting where I'm sitting around a table and there's proper microphones and, but I've never done my own. And people say to me, "Don, if you're going to do a podcast, then don't just start with your phone." And I'm sitting here in my bedroom in front of my phone. So I'm doing everything wrong. But I just thought it'd be good to get one out there rather than think about it. And, so there we are. It's out there now. And hopefully it will build into something a little bit more professional. Here's that cup again. So I thought this little podcast today, because it's all about this new novel, I would take you through a little bit of the process of how I write novels and why. Only briefly. And talk to you about the idea of each story and how it became a novel. So Only in America was my first novel I published, 2000. And it hinges on a young writer in London who cannot get her work read because she doesn't have an agent, she's not a writer, but she's written a very, very good film script, which has been rejected and ignored. And in America, inadvertently, it's picked up by a big movie mogul, and he loves it, and he wants to make this film, and he charges his people with making this film. So there's pandemonium in America, there's desolation in London. It's a love story, and it's great fun, and I enjoyed writing it. And it was a very important book because it was sold as a movie at least a couple of times. And I spent a lot of energy and time trying to get it set up as a film, and it fell over eventually, very disappointingly. But, silver lining and stuff, it led to me writing Eclipsed, and my foray and Tom's foray into the world of film with, as you know, very different results. So that was my first novel. And then I wrote The Ripple Effect, which is a book about a jamless jam donut. So Nikki's cousin, now passed again, shows how old I am, everyone's dead. He used to work in a donut factory. His name was Stephen. And he told me one day that when he was in a bad mood, he wouldn't put any jam into the jam donuts. And I thought this was hilarious. I thought, gosh, isn't that funny? Imagine someone who was really looking forward to a jam donut and didn't get any jam in his donut and was furious and did something as a result of that, fury. And that led to something. And I liked the idea of a ripple spinning out of control. And I thought, wouldn't it be funny if it became a big news story and something cataclysmic or amazing happened as a result of, originally this innocuous piece of dough. So that was The Ripple Effect. And then I came to write a book called A Man's Life, which was originally called The Fruit Bowl, which I might republish as The Fruit Bowl. I think it's a better title. So we all have abiding memories of our childhood. And one of my abiding memories is I was, take you back to I was about 15, I was in a playground at school. I went to a nice school in London, comprehensive school, but it was some rough kids as well. And I was being picked on in a playground by a kid much bigger than me. And I wasn't a brave kid, I wasn't a fighter, but I didn't easily back down. I was quite defiant, quite determined, and this kid and I were organising to have a fight after school, which I thought, that's going to be a nightmare. There's no one to stop it, you know. And I was really worried, and I was really upset and anxious that, what time would you like to fight? Where should we fight? Where should we... Anyway, I was thinking, oh God, this is awful. Anyway, to my great relief, this massive, great big bloke from a few years above me came up, saw what was happening, and said, and intervened and dispatched this bully on my behalf. He said to the guy, he said, look, if you touch this kid, you'll have to deal with me. And it was off. And I was incredibly relieved, but I didn't say thank you. I was embarrassed. I felt humiliated. But I never forgot this bloke, and I even remembered his name. His name is Jarlath Vahi, which is an unusual name, but there you go. And I'd never forgotten him, and I thought, gosh, wouldn't it be a great story if the little guy, me, in years to come, 30 years, say, comes to pay back that favour. So in that moment in the playground, that big guy did something that's going to really come back and be a feather in his cap. And here's the thing: that was the start of that was the little idea for this book I wrote. And as I was writing it, lo and behold, I get a message on social media, an email from who else but Jarlath Vahi, and his email was very enchanting because it said, Dominic, I was at school with you. You won't remember me, but I do. Will you come and do a fundraising gig for my village hall, locally in London? Or just outside London. We don't have villages in London. So brilliant. I went to do the gig, great. And I said to him, do you remember this incident? And I was really quite excited to tell him and share it. And do you know what? He didn't even remember it. And I found that even more compelling, that it was so innocuous to him, he couldn't even recall it. So I thought, in the story, wouldn't that be amazing if something as incidental to him, but seismic to the young kid, created this story. Anyway, so there's that story, and I really enjoyed writing it. And then I wrote a book called Open Links. Now, some of you will know that I play golf. I play golf very averagely. I'm a 15 handicap golfer, but I'm a very enthusiastic golfer. And golf is it's an unusual game because, as difficult as it is, no matter how average you are at golf, there are great shots that we can all play. You might play a shot as well as anybody on the tour. You might put a 60-yard chip into the hole. You might, scream a 6-iron around a tree onto a green. But they're very infrequent if you're an average player, like me. Now, over the years, I've hit hundreds of brilliant, peerless golf shots, but with masses of shots in between. And I was always very excited at the prospect of, imagine if those golf shots coagulated, if you like, and joined together and came sequentially, just all sort of lined up for an ordinary guy to have this extraordinary round of golf. And I made it over the most illustrious tournament in the world, the Open, and I had it as a journeyman golfer having this extraordinary round of golf. So I thought that was a good idea for a story, Open Links. And that brings me to my recent novel, which is called I, Gabriel. Now, I, Gabriel is a very short book, 50,000 words, 55,000 words, and I did that deliberately with a view to attention spans diminishing, people not reading. So I thought, if I write a quick book that could really be read in a day, that might be a good thing. What's the kernel? Now, this is a kernel that's been in my head for many, many years, and I'll explain it to you. I'm very exercised by homelessness, as I'm sure we all are. It's very tangible, you see it, and it impacts on us. Whereas you might see a handicapped person, and you'll get a sense of your good fortune, and maybe you'll be a little ashen because we complain about our lot. But a handicapped person might have been born with that condition, blind or cerebral palsy. But homelessness, you're not born with homelessness. Everyone's born with a home. It's something that transpires over a number of years, which I think it makes it a little bit more almost visceral. And we spend our lives thinking about our homes and how we could improve them, what I would like to do to my house. I'd like to have a bigger kitchen, I'd like to have a new hallway, I'd like to have it decorated. And we really can't conceive of how someone comes to a position having no home. How does someone wake up in the morning having slept on the street, and then suddenly that's them for the day? They just wake up with their possessions and then their day is set. What do I do? That's extraordinary, and it's always affected me, and you wonder how they get there. Okay, so I go through phases of homelessness and how it affects me. I go through phases of giving money and not giving money, because they spend it on the wrong things. Giving money because how can I not? So I go through phases. And one of the charities that the Brothers Trust support, this is a bit of an aside, is in Detroit, and they basically make coats that turn into sleeping bags for homeless people, and it's a great charity, a very worthy charity. And the lady who founded it was giving a coat to a homeless lady, and the lady said, I don't want a coat, I want a job. And that was her light bulb moment, because then she decided to then employ homeless people to train them and create these coats. And there's, I think, approaching 200,000 coats around the world, and predominantly in America, but there's some in Britain now, because we gave them some money. The Brothers Trust gave them some money, which is the trust that Tom heads up, or is the figurehead of, and we collect money, and it's a great thing, and we enjoy running it. And it's all the money's given out, it's all voluntary, on a voluntary basis. And so I have this coat with me, because I took a picture of me in the coat. You can see the blog on my site. And I went to give it out. It was cold in London. I thought, we can't be in the house for long. That's a terrible thing. Let's go and give it to someone. So I went to see a kid locally to where I live. I just found him on the streets, and I got chatting to him, and I told him who I was and blah blah blah. He was 27, which, and he's definitely living on the street. And I gave him the coat and some money, and that was it. And about 5 days later, I saw the same guy, and he didn't have the coat. And we were chatting again, and I was disappointed he didn't have the coat. He said, I gave it to a friend, and I wasn't sure if that was right. I thought, I'd like to have seen you in the coat, Anyway, a friend of mine is a comedian, Gary Coleman, super nice guy, and he's a palliative doctor by day, working with the homeless people. And I told this story to Gary. I said I was disappointed he didn't have my coat, and Gary said, well, Dom, we give phones to homeless people all the time, and they never have them when they come to see me again. And they'll tell you that they've lost them, but they're actually selling them to raise the money. And Gary's words were to raise the 200 they need for their drugs. I said, what do you mean 200? And he said £200 is what these guys can spend a day to get through. And it shocked me. I thought, that's a lot of money, isn't it? £200 a day. Outside the professions, that's quite a lot of money. And you realise they have to beg, steal, borrow, and as Gary put it, sell whatever part of their body is most valuable to get that money. And it really, I thought, oh God. Anyway, I'm digressing. Homeless people, when I give them money, a note, if I give them a note, very often they want to shake your hand and engage you in conversation. And I tend to want to avoid that, because I have a hygiene thing, okay? I'm not proud to admit that. But, even if I shake an ordinary person's hand, especially if it's clammy, I think, why do you have to shake my hand after, I'm thinking now I'm going to have to go and wash my hands, because if I have an apple or a packet of crisps or chips, whatever you call them in America, and especially with homeless people, because they have no hygiene facilities, and I think, this is no good for me at all. So I try to avoid touching them. Sounds awful, doesn't it? I don't know. Sounds terrible, that does, but there we are. I'm just being honest. Telling you about the kernel of this story. So I was excited at the prospect of, imagine if a person did give a homeless person something significant, some money, and that person insisted on engaging them in conversation, and they shared a meal. They shared a meal that the homeless person had already. And in sharing that meal, the donor is struck down with food poisoning. And because of that food poisoning, something happens to them. They miss something. they don't do something, they can't do something because they're poisoned, and that something changes their life. So here, that's the story of Gabriel. Well, that's the kernel, if you like, and from there, and it's just built up over the number of years. I've thought that's a great idea for a starting point of a story, and it gets to a point where it's so big that I need to write it, and I've as I say, it's 50,000 words, but I have written it at least 20 times, so it's 1,000,000 words of a lot of effort, and I think it's very good by my standards. People have liked it. Friends of mine who've read it, kindly read it. Tom read it and really liked it. So that said, I feel I've got to give it a chance, and that's why I'm trying to do a podcast. Now, there will be another podcast to come. I don't know when. They said to me, Dominic, you need to know when your next one is. It needs to be at the same time each duration, each period, either weekly or monthly, but you can't just leave it out there, which is what I'm doing. Another mistake. But I don't mind making the mistake, because at least it's a start, right? And I am going to start getting involved in technology much more, hopefully successfully. And the book cover will be professional. I'm going to have an Audible version done. Mate of mine, John Peters, is going to read that. He's a great actor, older guy than me, 70 odd, fantastic, nice guy. And he's going to read Gabriel for me, because it's written in the first person. And thank you for listening. I hope this has been fun. It's taken me about, far too long to do. But anyway, I'm glad I've done it, and I hope it can be followed up and bear fruit. Best wishes to you all. Thanks for listening. Share, subscribe. You can't subscribe. You can't share because, well, maybe you can share, but you can't subscribe because I haven't set any of the channels in place. But when you can subscribe, do so. Thank you.